Hello, this is Rev Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and this is Rev Don's Vlog. And today I wanted to talk about the subject of books and lessons. And this has to do with what's been going on in my life recently. And this year, year 22 Aquarius, 2022 AD, seems to be a big year for publishing for the Correllian tradition. We are bringing out our degree books in newly revised form, and this week I finished the third degree and sent it off to the publisher. And the new third degree has more than 70 new illustrations that were not in the previous edition. And it's also been brought up to date with things that have changed in the more or less 20 years since it was written, particularly regarding the internet and how to use it, how to network in the world, which certainly has changed in that time. So that was a big job, and it has gone off, and I'm on to the next book. And, I find that although it's a big job, it's so much easier than it once was. I remember many years ago laying out books by hand. And my mother was in the publishing industry at certain points in her life. And I remember seeing books laid out by hand by commercial artists at that time, which were a little more sophisticated than what we did in the underground press, but not much. And I remember typing articles on typewriters and pasting them with either tape or various adhesives onto the base paper and then having them printed. I remember things like blue pencil, and it's such a world away from doing a book on computer. And it's so much easier, but still a big job. And to do a book properly, there are so many things to consider, including how you're placing images, making sure that your text is going to the right places and not having weird things like the introduction to a paragraph in one page and the paragraph on the other. And it's a lot of little adjustment to prepare a book. And that's what I have been doing the last couple of weeks, and will be doing for the foreseeable future, because we have quite a few books in line. We have the degree books, we have Ritual and Theory and Practice, we have the Common Book of Wicca being re-edited, we have versions in various languages being edited. A lot going on. The other thing I wanted to talk about, because this got me thinking about it, is what makes our books and our lessons unique. I often say when discussing this subject that I always refused to write a book when I was younger because I didn't feel like I had anything unique to say. I felt like there was no point in just writing another book that says all the same things. And then in the late 90s, I was convinced that, yes, maybe our take on things was different than other people. And I finally set about writing. And I think that, in fact, our take is very different. And our books and lessons, therefore, have a certain value of their own that I won't go so far as to say is unique, but I think is special to them. And it rests particularly in three things. The first is accessibility, although we're certainly not the only accessible books. But in writing, particularly first and third degree, I tried to be as accessible as possible in language and presentation. A lot of metaphysical books historically have used complex language and big words to make themselves difficult to read intentionally. And I have to admit, I did a little bit of that in second degree, which in the revision I'm hoping to get to lessen. But in first and third, I really made an effort to be accessible, which isn't necessarily the way that I speak, but I thought it was important for this purpose to be accessible in writing. Second thing is the emphasis we place on psychic development. From a Correllian point of view, psychism and magic really are different uses of the same muscles, for want of a better way to put it, the same skills, the same access to the higher self and working with the astral plane. One is passive. In psychic work, we receive information. The other is active. In magic, we send out our will to become manifest. But we're using the same tools to do both. And we have in all of our degree lessons systemic exercises designed to develop those skills. And, it doesn't, I usually don't necessarily say everything you're going to get out of it when I put it out there. You'll find it as you do it. But the exercises are extraordinarily helpful, not just in psychic work, but also in magical work. And as you go farther, this will become evident. And I think that's very important. I think that one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they think if they have native psychic ability, they don't need training. And this might be true for some people, but generally is the worst mistake one can make. Because when something is coming to you naturally that way, I believe you're pulling it through from other lives, but you don't necessarily have full control of it. When you learn it, even if you're relearning it, you learn those controls, and those controls are very important. For example, how to shut it off when you don't want it, how not to be overwhelmed by it, how not to have your energy unbalanced by it. These are all very important points, and we cover them very early in our works. The other thing that I think is distinct for the Correllian degree lessons, um, whether in book or at witch school, is the emphasis on shadow work. And we certainly aren't the only people who emphasize shadow work, but shadow work is very, very important. And we start teaching it from the very first lesson. We don't necessarily use the word shadow work because that can be a frightening word for some people. We talk about cleansing and healing, but that's what it is. And we focus on shadow work really from start to finish because it's very important to be clear in what you're doing when you're doing magic if you want to have a good result. And people will say, oh, I know exactly what I want, but it isn't just your conscious mind you're working with. It's your higher self, it's your unconscious. You need to have them all in line. And to get really good results, this is very important, and this requires shadow work. I have known people who had native psychic ability, native magical ability, who could destroy any situation in 24 hours because of the crossed wires they had never resolved. And they would think they wanted one thing, but internally they were working against it, and the result would be a disaster. Shadow work would have resolved that. And so from the very first lesson, we focused heavily on shadow work as well as psychic development, as well as the more obvious things that you would include in lessons on witchcraft, like spellcraft and how and why all of these things work. I guess that's the third thing I would say, that in writing the books and creating the lessons that I wanted to focus on is why we do certain things, why they work. So often you see people in the metaphysical world who are doing things that they can't really explain in terms of their origin or why they're doing it. They all actually have explanations. They all have real purposes. Some are outdated, and I do not use those. Some are more useful for some people than for others. That's all certainly true. But the things we do, like why do we cleanse a circle before we cast it? Well, obviously, you need to have the energy clear. Why do you cleanse yourself before and after any psychic or magical working? You want your own energy to be clear, and you want to be grounded. You want to stay grounded. These are simple things, but so many books don't talk about them. And I would go so far as to say that in many traditions of metaphysics, it's not a thing. I used to work, and this is not to speak ill of them, but I used to work with a lot of spiritualists, and the idea of grounding your energy was totally absent from their teachings as far as I could tell. And I knew a lot of people when I worked with the D&H Psychic Fair Circuit back in the 1980s who were totally burned out from the energy they had not grounded. I was very fortunate that the people who taught me had taught me to always ground. And you'll find that in the lessons, vitally important, because that energy will burn you out if you don't, at least if you're using a lot of it. And ungrounded energy has unpleasant side effects, even if you're using just a little. And we cover that in the very first lesson because you need to know it from the very beginning. And these are some of the reasons that I think the lessons that I and we have developed are worth looking at, worth reading. And so as I'm putting these books together, I'm reminded of this. And as I'm revising, I'm trying to emphasize these strengths. And I do have a question for you. If you've had our books or taken our lessons, what did you find the strengths and weaknesses? I would be curious to see what people have to say on the subject, and if you find the strengths to be the same ones that I find, which you very well might not. Every person is individual, every person has their own experiences, and your experiences might differ from what I consider the strengths of these works. Um, so I would like to hear people's take on the subject. And with that, I seem to have gone about 10 minutes, so I've talked quite a bit. But next week, I hope to be showing the proof copy of the new third degree, and also ordering all of the copies that have pre-sold. But I don't feel that I should do that before getting the proof copy. The title of this vlog is Books and Lessons, and one lesson I have learned is don't order until you've seen the proof copy, because a number of things can go wrong, even though they look perfectly fine on your computer. The illustrations may come out too dark. They may be grainier than they appear on screen. There could be other problems. Always get a proof. And so I'm waiting currently for the proof copy. It's supposed to arrive on Monday. Monday to Wednesday, so either on Monday or Wednesday, I hope to share the proof copy with you. And I shall look forward to that, and I hope that you look forward to it as well. Please hit like, subscribe, and share, depending on the platform that you're using, if you like the vlog. And feel free to ask questions in the comments. I have a few questions that I will be dealing with next week. And as you know, the vlog mostly runs on viewers' questions. But with all of this work in publishing going on, I did want to share some of the things that I'm doing. So thank you, and until next time, may you blessed be.